From a cow being transported by helicopter, to a plane landing without landing gear, to a plane losing a wheel in midair, here are some rare moments of flying machines caught on camera. Let's start with this unusual scene. Ambrose Arnold, a farmer and cow herder, are with his cattle in the high pastures of the Clausen Pass in the Swiss Alps. As he prepares to drive his cows down to the lower Alps, Ambrose soon encounters a problem. One of his cows has been limping for a month, and making the descent would certainly be very hard on the poor animal. Ambrose racked his brains and finally found a solution. He simply calls for a helicopter. Yes, a helicopter. You could say that Ambrose is capable of anything for his cow. What generosity! The aircraft arrived, the cow was tied up, and found itself flying through the air, under the worried gaze of its owner, afraid that something bad might happen to the animal during the flight. Fortunately, everything went well. The farmer quickly forgot his worries when the traveler arrived safely. The man can only be proud of having given her this first flight. In Akureyri, Iceland, the owner of the car you see did not know that he was about to have an unforgettable experience because of a helicopter. This person was among the visitors to the air show held in the city to watch the air shows. When he arrived, he had trouble finding a place to park his car. With a little effort, he finally found a huge vacant lot, just for him. Satisfied, he left his car there but later regretted it. Why? Well, look. This helicopter belonging to the Coast Guard lifted the car, which was parked in a forbidden place, and then dropped it under the horrified eyes of the spectators. One can easily imagine the look on the car owner's face when he returned to find a pile of debris instead of his car. He will have learned a lesson. Next time he will think twice before parking his new car somewhere. Now imagine that you have come to see an air show in your area. You feel very lucky and you are waiting impatiently for the fighter planes to start their show. But suddenly you see one helicopter and one helicopter only, soaring high into the sky. You wonder what the hell this aircraft is doing. You take out your phone and you can't take your eyes off the sky. You are witnessing one of the most beautiful air shows you have ever seen in your life. This helicopter has just fired several flares at the same time. A magical show. Admit it. You were afraid that one of these flares would hit you, but it was worth it and you go back home, without stopping to see and review this video on your phone. That helicopter was a sight to behold. Now watch what the pilot of this private jet does as he prepares to make a routine landing. After a moment in the sky, he brings the aircraft down and prepares to land it on the runway. That's when he encounters a problem he hadn't anticipated. The landing gear refuses to extend. No need to panic. The pilot decides to apply a delicate maneuver called belly landing, which consists in landing the aircraft on the runway, even with the landing gear retracted. It's a success. As you can see, he manages to land the plane gently, without causing any damage. Phew, that must have made him sweat. But it will be a pleasant memory because everything ended well and the pilot was able to catch his breath, and thanks to this feat, he has won the admiration of everyone. Do you know what happened to this passenger on a Canadian airline? Well, like all the other passengers, he was waiting quietly for takeoff. When the plane finally started to taxi down the runway, he mechanically glanced out of the window when he was unpleasantly surprised to see that one of the wheels on the landing gear was starting to heat up and cause sparks. The passenger immediately took out his phone and filmed the scene. He managed to immortalize the moment when the plane lost this wheel during takeoff. Disaster. The trip quickly turned into a nightmare for the passengers of this flight, but, to everyone's relief, the pilots quickly noticed the incident and returned to the airport to solve the problem, just a few minutes after taking off. Our friend found himself back on board another aircraft, relieved, but probably still in shock. The experience of this American hiker was probably the worst of her life. The 70-year-old woman was in the countryside in the Phoenix, Arizona area with her husband. While walking and trying to reach a difficult area, she fell and injured her face, wrist, and hip. Despite the pain, she resisted and was very patient until help arrived. Luckily for her, the helicopter arrived in time and she was lifted onto a stretcher ready for evacuation. It could have ended like that. It didn't. Unfortunately, her rescue soon turned into a fiasco. The stretcher began to spin for unknown reasons and the more the aircraft flew away, the faster and more revolutions were made. The stretcher is said to have spun 170 times. The result was panic and nausea. Luckily, she was evacuated in time by rescue workers and her vertigo passed a few days later. Her video went viral on the internet, making her a star. I don't think she'll be getting back on a chopper anytime soon. These holidaymakers were having a good time on the beach. They were enjoying the sun and the sea when a fighter plane flew over their heads. Fascinated by the metallic bird, they all raised their heads to follow the aircraft with their eyes. Wow. On the video, we can clearly see that these people have just experienced a rare and unusual moment. The fighter plane made a mess of the beach and the holidaymakers were left with their belongings in a jumble. But it didn't matter. After this incident, they had to take their time to put away their towels and put their parasols and tents back in their place. Well, that's a memory they'll keep forever. Let's now turn to the pilot of this A380 Airbus who has just arrived at his destination. In the video, we can see that he is trying to land the big aircraft, but the strong winds of the storm are preventing him from doing so. He then decides to make a so-called crab landing. Look, thanks to this maneuver, he managed to land the aircraft gently despite the strong winds. One can easily imagine the stress this pilot must have experienced in landing his plane in this way. But all's well that ends well. He managed to taxi his plane back onto the runway normally. His incredible maneuver made him a real hero. Pay close attention to what the pilot of this plane is going to do. The pilot had just arrived at Barcelona airport and was about to land, but against all odds, he came up against another plane that was taxiing and he righted himself at the last moment, narrowly avoiding a collision with the other plane. One can certainly guess the reaction of this pilot who must have panicked for a brief moment and managed to recover quickly. Pilots are used to incidents like this. Our hero was able to reach the airport after flying over the city for a few minutes and checking with the control tower that there were no other planes on the runway. Clearly, this man has had to be extra vigilant since that day. The owners of this refuge in Haute-Savoie, in the Mont Blanc Massif, had just opened their establishment for the summer season. They had begun all the preparations, ready to welcome tourists again. But first, they had to get rid of the large amount of threatening snow hanging from the roof. A task which, at first sight, did not seem so difficult, except that the snow was so hard that clearing it proved to be a very laborious task. They even thought of removing it with a chainsaw, despite the risks involved. Imagine someone climbing onto the slippery roof to cut the snow and then falling off. The owners didn't have much of a choice, and they had to get rid of all that snow. They didn't expect a helicopter to come and help them with this task. The helicopter, which had come to supply the refuge with food and gas bottles, used its skid to break up the hard ice on the roof. In this way, the pilot saved the owners from having to clear their roofs of snow with a chainsaw, and thus from running an unnecessary risk. We must admit, it was not at all easy to remove it, but after many attempts, this spectacular snow removal operation succeeded. The ice finally came off the roof, to the amazement of the owners. The owners, who were watching the show, ended up with a fair amount of snow on their heads. But it was thanks to this delicate maneuver mastered by the helicopter pilot that they were able to go about their other business, happy to have saved precious time, and very grateful to the helicopter pilot for having lent them a hand. Would you like to experience something sensational and out of the ordinary? You're already comfortably seated in front of your screen to watch the video I'm about to show you right now. Watch it then. You've never seen anything like this, have you? You are amazed and you continue to watch the acrobatics of this crazy helicopter in the sky. But then you start to watch the video a second time, and a third time, and that's it. You are suddenly dizzy. Come on, calm down now. You take a deep breath and close your eyes. This scene is worthy of a real attraction, isn't it? In fact, I'm sure it's made you want to take a helicopter ride on your next adventure. We will end with an incredible but true scene. It happened in India, during the elections in one of the states of the country. The pilot of this Indian Army helicopter was carrying members of an election team. As he was about to land, a large plastic bag came out of nowhere and flew past the helicopter. It was total panic on board. But the pilot is no novice, and he quickly positioned the aircraft so that one of the blades would hit the bag. And that's how he managed to avoid the crash of the helicopter, but not without having suffered a big scare and caused anguish to his passengers. The pilot was finally able to land gently, having saved his life and that of the others. However, he must still be shivering at the thought of what could have happened that day. These were 12 rare and unusual moments of planes and helicopters that were filmed by camera during their flight. Which ones amused, fascinated, or shocked you the most? We're waiting for your answers in the comments, and by the way, if you like this video, don't forget to give us a like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell to receive all the notifications and not miss anything of our next publications. See you tomorrow at the same time on the same channel for a new video.